The Software Leaders Uncensored podcast, where tech leaders grow beyond the code.
Welcome, everyone, to the Software Leaders Uncensored, the podcast where tech execs get real. I'm your host, Steve Taplin, entrepreneur, software guy, and a guy who's been through the fire more times than I can count. If you're looking for polished talking points, you're in the wrong place. If you're looking for raw, honest conversations with top engineering minds, unfiltered, that's what we do here. And if so, you're where you belong. So let's jump into it. I have the honor of having Jason Tesser as our guest today. Jason, welcome.
Thank you, Steve.
Jason, you're a unique CTO breed. You're a 5-time founder, CTO, principal architect, and engineer. Tell everyone more about yourself, please.
Sure. Short version? You want the 60-second version?
60-second version to start.
Okay. So, started in the late 90s. I worked for government and Uncle Sam back then, but as I got out, I worked for a few different universities and actually had founded 2 different pieces of software for them. A lot of that stuff revolved around more not networking software, but like monitoring software of firewalls, things for DMZs, back in, old terminology, but stuff for web servers back then, and just basically monitoring large amounts of data and internet traffic. From there,
Jason, you look too young. You got the spiked hair. You're too young for that.
No, I've been around a little bit. So yeah, and after all that, got into the ECM space, that's enterprise content management space, and CMSs were a real kind of enterprise CMSs were a real big thing then. So think less WordPress and Drupal, think more, or Joomla, or with Mambo back in those days, because I am old. If you think about more like competitors to like AEM, it was Days Software back then. That was before Adobe bought them, Microsoft CRM, Oracle's product. So I kind of got into that space and actually took a product all the way to acquisition there, and then worked on another integration product, which was a larger product revolving around microservices, so a very different kind of architecture. The previous one was Java, monolithic, and then this one was more, about 100 microservices and more mock alliance kind of stuff. And again, more into content, making content composable, something that companies are still trying to solve and really have not solved properly, but was in that space. And we moved that more to sell, and now I'm working here with Revvable, where we have a SaaS product focused on really tooling for salespeople in the power sports space, which are people who sell motorcycles, jet skis, Polaris units, anything, trailers even, anything that fits in that realm, all those kind of dealerships. It's a vertical that doesn't get a lot of love from software. Big dealerships in automotive do, but these dealerships, and there's thousands and thousands of them, don't. We have a SaaS product that provides CRM and reporting and what's called Autofill, so they can quickly fill bank applications for their customers out and save their salespeople money.
And I want to get into Revvable here in a little bit, but I want to talk more about you.
Yeah.
So you have founded 5 companies and worn every hat, from principal architect to senior engineering manager to CTO. What's one brutal lesson you wish you would have learned earlier in your career as a CTO?
Sure, that's a good question, and in that there's probably a lot of them. I'm going to select one though. I think the one that for me, and it's one that I preach a lot today, so meaning to the people I work with in my company and engineers, is the importance of data engineering. And often it's the thing that gets paid the least attention to. And there is so many, even back-end engineers, not just your front-end engineers, who just have, it's always the last thing we think about. But of course, it's often the first thing that is actually causing us trouble. It limits our growth. It limits our ability to scale the software. We can sell it all day.
To utilize AI and
absolutely
every buzzword that goes with it.
Absolutely. So I think I would say that it's making sure that all of my engineers, and I'm a big believer in people are good at something or a couple of things. Nobody's great at everything. None of us are, even though I like cross-training and moving. I know there's different schools of thought there, but I'm a big believer in helping all of my engineers and getting a team that does understand how data comes in and out of systems and how it works. It makes engineering better at every level of the stack. And it is the thing that I found crippling 25 years ago. I found it crippling 10 years ago, and I find it crippling today, no matter how many libraries and tech comes out to solve the problem.
Yeah.
And it feels to me that it's actually something that's a bit of a lost art. Because when I started, in the 90s, when I started, engineers understood data structures more than the common engineer does today, I believe. And some of that is good and some of it's bad. But I think it's important to understand those things. And I think it's the thing that has crippled me the most in the software companies that I have worked with the most over my career.
I love it. And that is a great point, and I couldn't agree with you more. Let's talk, I love the fact that you're a 5-time founder. I'm actually finishing up my first book that is called 30-20-10. I have had 30 different companies, 20 have failed, and 10 have been successful.
That's good.
And I'm a real big believer in custom software to differentiate your company, the experience. It gives you a better valuation. It helps you raise money. I've lived and breathed my whole career. You've taken, as a 5-time founder, you've taken business plans and turned it into scalable software. What's your secret for that?
I don't know.
How do you control the people who have no idea software engineering, what goes into it, what it takes?
Yeah, I don't know that there's any secret I can offer. I can tell you, well, nobody's great at everything, and that certainly includes me. But I honestly bring value, as do almost everyone I've ever worked with. For the most part, they have things to contribute. We all have things to contribute in value. One of the values that I bring, Steve, is I'm a really good bridge between business development and whether that's sales, whether that's marketing, Steve, whether that's working with entrepreneurs. I've worked with a few in my day as well, and bridging that into tech. And that's where I tend to shine, and that's kind of my sweet spot. And that has worked well for me as an engineer, because I'm an engineer who can at least bridge a little bit to the business development side. And as I grew as an engineer and eventually moved into learning how to architect and a principal and eventually an EM, right, engineering manager and director and VP. And then I've had a few opportunities to be a CTO as well. So as I've moved through that stuff, that skill has helped me. And I've tried to learn. I've been open. One thing I always encourage my engineers to do is, look, not everyone's like that. Now, I have an engineer who doesn't want to do any of that. He's been around a while, but all he likes to do is code. He really doesn't want to be promoted to, and he doesn't want to be the EM. He would like this particular engineer. He wants to code. But one of the things I've encouraged him and others is that's fine, but all of us need to, let's learn why business development people, sales, marketing, the executives in the company, why do they feel the way they feel? Why are they thinking what they're thinking? And as engineers, let's come in on the technical side and understand their perspective. And too often engineers, because they are often the smartest people in the room, or at least they feel they are, whether that's true or not, in their own minds, they are.
Engineers are very unique geniuses.
Yes.
You got to let them put their headphones on, get in the zone, and do their thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And they definitely believe they're the smartest people in every room, and often they are. So, but that doesn't mean that they know what the other side is actually saying and that they're viewing it from that perspective. And it takes sales and marketing and executives and CFOs and different levels of engineering all over the place to make the company function and for it to be successful. You cannot win at one level and lose at the other levels and win. And I don't know that that's the secret. I think most people would agree with that. But in practice, I don't see often in tech what I'm saying gets left behind. And my advice would be, and it's my advice with all the engineers that I work with, is let's understand why the salespeople, the support people, the business development people feel the way they feel.
So to sum it up, your superpower is getting everyone in the company on the same page.
I try.
All right. Great answer. Let's go back to your company, Revvable. Tell me more about it. Tell me what you guys are disrupting in the power sports and vehicle markets.
Yeah, so the power sports space is not very difficult to understand. it's a smaller space than automotive. And the dealerships are often mid-size, sometimes small, but what maybe we would call a mid-level company. And a lot of times they're still what we might call mom and pop shops. We're not dealing with Fortune 500 or 1,000 companies as I did at a number of the places I worked. Here, these are, now some of these companies, some of these places do own 10 dealerships, 40 dealerships, 80 dealerships. So, I mean, those are a bit larger, but they're nothing like, say, your Ford dealerships. It's a different level. So the software that's out in this space caters more to automotive. Power sports has always been hey, you kind of can have these crumbs from the table. So their software is very old. And so there was space about 5 years ago where companies like us and a few others came in and said, okay, there's opportunity here and there's need here, and let's start providing some better sales tools, CRM tools to be able to run your power sports dealership. Now, this is not what's called a DMS. For anyone who's listening who knows the space, right? We're not in the dealer management system. DMS, I know, can mean other things in tech as well. But in this case, it is also a reference to dealer management system. That space is kind of controlled by a couple different companies. What we came in and did is we worked with the DMS space, and we had a Wedge product. So, Steve, like our intro in, right, was this Wedge product. Our ultimate goal was to become a CRM with all kinds of like reporting and AI and other things, and that's where we're moving towards and are very far along right now. But our initial Wedge product was this Autofill tool, and it's a Chrome extension so it can run in Edge, it can run in Chrome, and it also comes with a credit app. So you can put this credit app on your website, send it to someone's phone, email, text, whatever. So customer logs in. So I'm Jason customer, and I fill out the credit app, my info, blah, blah, blah. So now it's all in the system. Well, the autofill, what it can do is it can integrate with different lenders. So we work with lenders who work with these different power sports dealerships. And when the salesperson goes, they no longer have to sit and retype in all the info because maybe they got to fill 3 or 4 of these out per customer sometimes. They don't want to type it. It can take them 20 or 30 minutes. Our autofill can do that in seconds. It just fills the form out for you, similar to the way like an end-to-end test, like a Playwright or something would, except it runs as a Chrome extension, and it just fills the form out with the customer's data in that respect. Saves the salesperson tons of time.
It's my experience, and I've had some power sport toys as well as from buying cars. I think the salespeople who do that are the one-finger typers. So
of course.
That's like a really good tool to help efficiency.
It does. They would like to be calling, selling, closing leads, moving leads along. What they don't want to be doing is typing data, to your point. So this was our Wedge product. From here, we started, of course, now we have a credit app that's collecting all of customer data. We now are involved with the sales process. So we moved to a CRM. So we have the idea of leads and opportunities and being able to create stages within that, all the things a CRM does. We're in reporting and email integration where customer emails, and we have that, and we intercept or get the emails from the customers, attach it to the lead. Same with texting, which we integrate with Twilio's Gmail and Microsoft Dynamics and things of this nature to get here. And we've added automations and sales sequences and all of this kind of tooling to assist sales managers, because our main target are a little bit of F&I people in the dealerships, but mainly sales managers and salespeople who are working in these power sports dealerships who just want help closing deals. And we've become an indispensable tool to basically help to close more deals quicker. And it's kind of a no-brainer in that point because, I mean, when you look at our cost first where it is, it's a bit of a no-brainer. We have very little churn in that respect, and it's a pretty easy sell once we get in. We're a SaaS product. I don't know if you want to talk about the tech. I can talk a little bit about the stack, but yeah.
Well, and thank you for that background, and that sounds exciting. What made you say yes to Revvable? To all the experience and skills you have to become CTO? Why did you go there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been here about a year. We had moved to sell the code base in the previous integration tool I was with. And so I was looking for something to do. And as a lot of people were, by the way, the beginning of last year, and maybe still are, right? So anyone in tech, right? There were more than just me. There was a lot of people.
Interesting times, no doubt.
Sometimes it's more challenging than others. It's been challenging the last couple years for us in tech, depending, not that you can't find a job, good people do, but good people also have struggled finding stuff. So I'm looking around, I'm going through some different opportunities. I had a connection with someone who was here at the time, and they just needed someone to come in and provide some leadership at the time. Now there was a different CTO, so I just kind of came in to provide technical leadership, like principal engineer, look at their stack. They were we just needed to shore up some things on the technical front to get the company moving forward. As I came in, was able to bring some concepts, some other ideas. The executive leadership and the board here had decided they wanted to move to, make me CTO and move on. And, I'm happy. I love building, and I love building teams. I love building products. I still code, Steve. I mean, some of us still do, some of us don't. I still code. So I code every week still.
I have found the best CTOs make sure they're still coding or they get too far out of touch.
No, I code. I code all the time. I still fix bugs. I don't do any. Honestly, one of the things is, even with the larger teams I've run, I'm a big believer in being able to do, at least being willing to do everything that you ask someone to do. So honestly, if, like my illustration here, it's a little crude, but right, if the toilet needs to be scrubbed and I'm available and nobody else is and I can scrub it, then I can get in there too, right? There is no job that, in that respect is beneath me. And that sometimes
I call that leadership by example, which you could be a leader by example, you could be a leader by intimidation. I'm with you. Leadership by example, willingness to roll your sleeves up is how you get the troops behind you.
Absolutely. It's tough when you're on the golf course and you're asking others to work late, right? And it just doesn't go over well.
You gave a really good nugget there, because we know a lot of listeners right now are director or VP of software engineering and or CTOs, CIOs, and good, bad, or indifferent, they've been on the chopping block quite a bit. Most times I see it's not always their fault. Sometimes it is. But you gave an interesting nugget there as far as how you got your current position and coming in from a more consultative perspective to provide some expert opinions. And that sounds like a great nugget for other senior engineering leaders to help them land their next roles.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, what you brought up there. Because, a lot of times it's like, well, I'm senior engineering manager, a VP of engineering. And it's like, I don't know. When I was looking around, I looked at some director roles, I looked at some principal engineering roles, I looked at some CTO roles, and for me, if you get in and provide value somewhere, Steve, I have always found that generally works. And look, there's no guarantees in life, and we all know that. But I have found if you get into a company and you are a good worker, have integrity, you provide value. And if you look around, you could provide value, because everybody has their skill set and things they're good at. And if you go in and provide value, personally, with those around me and myself, I have always found that works. In the end, that works.
I love it, Jason. And that is a great tip for anyone out there. Everybody, I think, uses the same tools for their resume. Trying to apply for jobs on LinkedIn can be a disheartening thing. And utilizing connections and relationships, being able to get in there and prove your value.
Absolutely.
That is absolutely the right mix. And I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, and I can share this if anyone is disheartened, and maybe their numbers will be better or worse than mine. I went through 450 opportunities through LinkedIn, and things that I actually, in some level, touch base, booked. Because I keep a spreadsheet, I have a little thing built, and I track all my stuff, and okay, this moves to rejected, this moves I got interviewed. I went through over 450 different opportunities with large and small companies, some of which I made to the very end, some of which I could have done. I went through over 450 before I settled here. At the end of the day, I needed something, yes, that was going to allow me and my family to function. But I also want to be And when I say happy, I want to do something that I enjoy. I want to do something that I can see myself providing value. And, I get it. We all, money does come first. At some point, we all need to eat. But, we also you need to get into a place where you can provide value, be comfortable, and,
I love it. The perseverance you showed, and there had to be lots of gut checks with over 400 opportunities you were chasing. And I love it. And the best things in life don't come easy. And I go back to my 30 ventures, 20 have failed and 10 have been successful. I guess if I was in the Baseball Hall of Fame, that would be a 333 batting average, which
That's
is pretty
okay.
good.
That's okay.
But man, the failures and the rejections, whether it's companies, whether it's trying to get a new leadership role, you gotta keep your head up and keep fighting. Awesome. Let's talk about your engineering team that you have.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned in the pre-show that you have about 12 engineers today.
Yeah.
How do you have your team structured? Let's talk about your tech stacks. Let's hear some of Jason's expertise here.
Okay, so some of this, there are definitely listeners who won't agree, and that's okay. Not everyone has to agree, and doesn't mean I'm right in everything I say.
There's no one right way to do anything in the software world. I will back you there.
There you go. So I'll talk about our tech stack real quick, and then I'll move on to our team. Our tech stack's pretty simple. We're built on top of GCP as far as what we run in production. The company was initially founded by ex-Google engineers, and it was West, California, Google engineers, so everything's GCP over there. So,
Okay.
and as a result, they had selected Go, so that's what we use for our back-end language. I'm okay with anything, right tool, right job, and to be fair, again, another stupid saying that I say a lot to our engineers is, if the only tool in your toolbox is a hammer, then every problem looks like a nail. And that's not a good thing, right? Because you don't want to be using a hammer on screws and things of that nature. You want to use a hammer on nails, and you don't want to use a screwdriver to try to pound the nail in because it doesn't work well.
That's what I've been doing wrong. My wife always
tells me. There you go. So we use Go as far as our backend language. We use on GCP. We're built on MySQL, not my personal favorite database, but it was here. And you know what? Technical debt's technical debt. I consider it technical debt, but it is what it is. You move forward, right? It's already in. And then we're React on the front end. So and then we have the Chrome extension, which is a little more vanilla JavaScript there. But those are our primary stack. GCP at the ops level, or GitLab. Yeah, those are our primary pieces. We do use some Docker to deploy to GCP, but that's where we are in the stack. As far as the engineering team, when I got here, again, this is probably the part maybe not everyone will agree with. I'm not a huge believer in full stack development. I know some people are. When I got here, the previous team, the thinking was, well, people are not maybe doing enough, we're not breaking up tasks well, and this person's doing a lot, and so we're just going to make everyone a full stack engineer. So, which basically meant we had a lot of front-end engineers who were experts in React, who are struggling or doing the best they can to write Go code and backend code, and also integrate and write the data structures, where I was saying earlier, like, if you don't understand data structures, and this was some of when I came in, I said, okay, wait, no. We've got some engineers here who are excellent at the back end and really good at the data level. We also have a number of you who, if you were filling out resumes right now and applying for jobs, you're applying for jobs as React engineers. You're not applying for jobs as Go engineers, even though that's 50% of what you're doing here, nor do you like doing it. Because it's not just that. They're also, engineers are temperamental, and we're a little like artists, and, it is what it is.
I've definitely seen full stack is tougher on Google Cloud versus AWS or Azure. Yeah. Based on the uniqueness of it.
It depends what you're doing and what services you are. I mean, we're hosting at GCP, but we're not relying on, their app engine and app building. Our stuff runs, we go into containers and it deploys. So even if we were at AWS for our stack, it would be the same unless we dug into more of those services. But as a general rule, I still like putting people where they're good and where they're experts at. So I broke the team up. We have our front-end engineers, and even in there, we have people who are more focused on the React code versus those who are more focused on the UI and UX, kind of web, HTML, CSS, or JavaScript kind of work there. On the back end, we primarily then handle the data structures. We handle the Go code, anything to do with MySQL. And then, of course, I help here as well, but we have a couple of us that manage the operations side of the house, making sure things can get deployed and support, dealing with issues, dealing with bugs. It has worked for us. I also moved us from a heavy was a lot of, this is something different people feel differently. I'm not a big one for the, let's come in and hold hands for 20 minutes at the beginning of the day, every day. Different size companies do need it. It depends on your team, but we had a very heavy sprint process. Yet we really didn't have a true product owner, and we didn't really have someone who was really managing the sprint process. So we cut back and went to a more simple Kanban kind of view of things, like this is where we are, this is what we're working on, here's our Kanban table, and here's our cards. And you know what? I have a Slack channel called ENG Dailies. The first thing you do as an engineer, anyone in engineering at any side, the very first thing you do when you come in is list what you're doing today. Every day. We have a thing of it. It's there. We don't all have to go to a 15 or 20-minute meeting. And again, I know others feel differently here. But I also feel like if I have engineers that I can't trust to do what they're saying they're doing and aren't doing it, well, that's my job as leadership, or other managers who work with me, it's their job to try to correct that. But at the end of the day, if that's not happening, then we have a personnel problem. So like I particularly believe in building a culture where I don't want you to feel, and I don't want to feel that if I don't jump in a stand-up with you, you're not going to work today. Now, we are a company that primarily works remote, and we have Slack, and there is some accountability there, and I also require engineers to commit code every day. If you wrote half a line today, that's what you wrote. That's fine. I was debugging all day. Couldn't figure it out. That's fine. But everyone works in a branch, and it's like commit your code every day. And engineering managers, myself, are able to, tech leads, we're able to review that and see that. And I'm able to ask, why didn't we get anything committed? Okay, you were working on this all day. Or you know what, let's not do that. Or, hey, can I jump in a screen share and help you with that? Or, hey, can I get tech lead over here to jump in a screen share and look at that with you? So it's not that we don't have the insight and visibility, but these were some of the things that I changed when I got here that, at least for us, worked.
Well, and I have found, look, depending on the size of your company, where your product is, there's so many factors that make determinations of what is the best model.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like you have found what works. Now, you said your entire engineering team is remote. Are they US based? Are they worldwide?
We're split. We're all in this time zone. Well, that's not true. We're all in US time zones.
Okay.
So we are at least, within 1 to 3 hours of each other at worst. We do have some contractor like designer work and people who help us on the product side who are in Europe, but I'm not counting them in this, and those are more contractors. But we do have some people who are near shore. And then the rest of us are stateside, and where I'm here in Florida. We have another engineer here in Florida, North Carolina. We have some people in Texas. So we're spread a little bit.
Gotcha. As a guy who's been building engineering teams for 25 years, what do you think has changed the most of the type of engineer you look for today versus 10 years ago?
Yeah. That's a great question. Part of my answer, I think, is not a lot, because I'm a big believer that, yes, a lot of things change, yet really nothing has changed at the same time. I mean, things have definitely progressed. That would be silly to say that's not true. But the kind of engineer who made a really good engineer 25 years ago, I still think is a really good engineer today, and I do think they're interchangeable. Even if, we were still coming out of COBOL and looking at Java and early EJB and all this stuff in the late 90s, early 2000s, and today the thinking's very different here. And even languages that have been around a long time, Java, PHP, these languages have grown and are very different from what they were 20 plus years ago. I don't think that the skill set is that different. And what I look for in an engineer is a couple of things. I don't really care if you can, like if I was hiring a new backend engineer, I kind of care if you can code Go, but I'm not Not that much. I would hire someone to write Go who hasn't written Go. I do want to know, what is your general knowledge of how things work, right? I want to know. I want to know if you're on top of some of the newer tech that's coming out. I want you to know if you understand where that tech comes from a little bit, and how does newer tech work. In today's world, that's different than 25 years ago. I might even want to know, how do you use AI in your coding, and where do you find it beneficial, and where do you find that AI doesn't provide benefit? Where is it that it still requires you, if it requires you? So I want answers to things like this. I so want to make sure engineers are not just stuck. I don't like people like, oh, well, I'm a job engineer and this is all that I know. And it's all I'm ever willing to learn. And my job is like 15 years old, right? Because I haven't really moved my thoughts from when I used to, read Campbell 25 years ago or 20 years ago, and his thoughts, and my thoughts are still that, right? I'm still stuck in, Spring 2.0 or 3.0 thinking, if I'm in the Java world.
So along those lines, Jason, so it's getting harder and harder to interview and qualify engineers as far as shadow tools for code tests. And gosh, we've seen creativity where they actually have somebody else very close to them that's typing everything in ChatGPT
In the ear.
or that's right. So how, when you're bringing on new engineers to your team, what process are you going through to verify skills?
It's not all of it. At the end of the day, I'm happy with any of it. It all works, and there are ways to verify and try to in camera and monitor all that. But Steve, I typically do a technical interview, but my technical interviews are still conversational. And like, for example, and it's just a simple example. I was hiring a React engineer a month ago. And some of the things I asked the React engineer on the call was, and, I do get on the call, I'm watching their camera, right? I mean, maybe they're typing in the chat GPT, but you could usually tell. And you could usually tell based on the answers, truth be told, right? The AI still doesn't quite speak quite as natural as they do, or someone's, the words they use change. Yeah. So I ask things like, tell me how events work in React. I want to know, and I just listen to them. And based on what they say, I may ask another question. I have a fairly well-rounded understanding of how engineering connects. That's something that's always been important to me, and I've stayed on top of. So I'm able to have conversation here. I asked this engineer, well, tell me how the hooks work exactly in React. Tell me, how would you do this? And I make it more conversational. I like that more than coding. You know what? Algorithms could be memorized. The coding tests all ask the same stuff. And honestly, if you study for about a month, you can pass most of if you're an engineer and you study for a good month, you could pass almost all of those. That doesn't mean you're a good engineer, though, because I need an engineer who can take Revvable's problems and can understand our database is failing us right now, and we're struggling with full text search, or we're struggling with this, and we need to improve the performance. And I need an engineer who can look at that problem and help me really think through. And to do that, you have to have the skills that requires to get past the technical interview I'm talking about. Just because you know the algorithms and you can recite to me what's on Medium or in a blog that you read, that doesn't really do it for me. Different people feel differently. And to be fair, the larger companies don't do it like I do it. They do it the other way. But I also think that what I'm saying is really critical, at least for me, in building a team.
Excellent. And it's definitely getting trickier these days, and there's lots of assist tools and things that we have definitely found the same approach of having a good conversation and talking about how they would solve the problem, whether it's in a specific language or our code base, has been the most effective, and keeping them away from tools. We actually have one client that they do all panel interviews, and they literally have somebody in the background that types every question into ChatGPT to see if the people are just reciting the same thing they get there. It's definitely, and in one sense, you want everybody to use tools available, but you need to make sure they're being authentic and that you're truly getting the right engineer.
That's right. And I need an engineer who can think, who can understand, who can process, and that's more what I'm looking at. I can teach any engineer to code. That's not the issue. I'm not worried about that. And I could give any good engineer a month and they can learn Go. That's fine. I need an engineer who can do it right and move forward. And that requires a different skill set.
Now, this has been a great conversation, Jason. Last point here. Let's talk pain point. What keeps you up at night as a CTO?
What keeps me up? Typically, because my brain never shuts down, so it's amazing I'm still alive.
I have that issue too.
It's amazing. Yeah, doctor, all the books, all the doctors are always like, yeah, you need to just like quiet down. I'm like, yeah, I don't know how I don't function that way. But that's something different. What keeps me up, I think, is just trying to peek around the corner, Steve, right? Like one of my jobs as a CTO, it was my job when I was a VP of engineering as well. I'm focused on what we're doing now, and I want to make sure the company's good. But I need to be looking around the corner. I need to be looking forward. What am I missing? And one thing I've learned to do over the years is at some point I realized I'm not, as I said earlier in this call, I'm not, a lot of times engineers think they're the smartest person in every room. It took me a number of years as a young engineer, but I got there, right? I'm like, okay, there's a lot I don't know. And even in the things I'm really sure of, man, so many things I was really sure of changed for me over time. The things I was certain would never change. And so I learned to be more open, to peek around the corner. And these are the kind of things I think that keep me up. Like, what am I missing? What can we be improving? What am I not bringing to the people around me and to the company? Because at the end of the day, this is about making money. This is about growing the business. That's why we work. That's why we're doing what we're doing. And what am I not bringing that I could be bringing where we could have closed more deals? We could have brought more features to the table that would have gotten things out the door. What am I missing that's going to not bring enough stuff in 6 months from now? Because if I need to implement some new reporting engine, that needs to be done now, not 6 months from, by the time we need it, like we need to have already done it. These are the kind of things that tend to keep me up. What am I missing?
Gotcha. Fantastic. Jason, how can people learn more about you, get involved, reach out to you?
Well, if you're in the power sports space, for sure, look us up. Revvable. As far as me, I'm on LinkedIn, always happy to chat and, happy to provide any help or assistance. I love tech, I love software, I love engineering. I pretty much do that and play games. So that's all I do.
Excellent. Jason, thank you so much for being a guest. I appreciate it. For all listening, thanks for tuning in to the Software Leaders Uncensored. This conversation made you think, laugh, or maybe even rethink your roadmap. Do me a favor. Subscribe, share, drop a review. If you have a good story or topic you'd like to hear on this show, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn. Until next time, be bold, lead smart, never settle for average. Thank you.
Bye-bye.